Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Chalon. Welcome to this next episode of In the Nick of Time. It's going to be a special one today with Megan joining us to talk about industrial control system. That's something we didn't talk much about yet on the show. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So thanks so much for joining us. As always, if you have questions, make sure you start with a Q in the comment section below. If you want to share you here and put your name and organization, we can highlight you on the screen as well. So many people always joining us, a lot of recurring friends. Thanks so much for being here. As always, wanted to remind everybody to register for the show if you have not done that yet. In the nickoftime.tv, you can get an email every week to get the next episode, but also the video we release every week. Last week was the episode on Service Mesh. So if you missed the video, we'll make sure to highlight that again here so you can take a look at why Service Mesh is a must for your organization. So check that out. Of course, if you would also subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nicolas Chalon, you'll be able to also get notifications for the videos as well there directly, much easier. So check out the last video on the Service Mesh where we do a deep dive on why a Service Mesh is a must to enable your teams to deliver not only at their own pace, but decouple teams between microservices and how to move at the pace of relevance between teams so you don't have to coordinate releases and coordinate code sharing across teams. So that's also a very important enabler to be able to adopt microservices and build a full-scale DevSecOps team. So, all right, with that, I'm going to bring in a second our guest here on the screen. But first, wanted to give you a quick rundown on who Megan Samford is. She's the VP and Chief Product Security Officer, CPSO, for energy management at Schneider Electric. She is responsible for driving the product security strategy and the programs for Schneider Electric energy management business. Of course, with a focus on the subject of today, which is the industrial control system security, critical infrastructure protections, and we'll dig into what ICS is for people here that don't know how different ICS systems are. Of course, in her role, she's funny enough in a world of a bunch of men, and she's the only female CPSO for a major industrial organization. She's been recognized as a huge achievement for women, of course, in industrial control system security. Not many women, unfortunately, in that universe. So that's something we love to fix. Also, she brings that expertise. She, if you look at her bio, you'll find also she did the time with the governor office in Virginia. So she knows very well kind of the challenges we are facing when it comes to security and how important critical infrastructure systems are to the nation and to being able to get water, power, and everything around us is effectively depending on those systems. As you've seen in the news in the last several years now, we've seen malicious actors and groups go after these targets that are often, unfortunately, insecure because of lack of funding, despite DHS and FEMA trying to do better with a great focus this year, particularly in funding better cybersecurity when it comes to critical infrastructure systems. So we'll talk about that today. We'll bring her first on the screen here. Welcome again. How are you doing?
Hi, Nick. Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you today on the show.
Yeah, it was so lucky to have you because we've never had the chance to go do a deep dive in critical infrastructure. We talked about a lot of different things on the show since we created it a few months ago. And quite honestly, it's always revolves around cyber and software and innovation. But, at the end of the day, people take for granted that, we're talking today through thanks to the power of the grid, and we drink water every day coming from the faucet, not thinking twice about it. And many people don't really understand what it takes for this to happen, particularly in a nation as complex as the United States, where none of that is centralized. I know back in France, back in the day, electricity was provided by the government. Now it's private again, but for many years it used to be something provided directly by the nation. So that's always something that's been intriguing to me. Of course, I I spent 2 years at DHS where we looked into critical infrastructure and cyber. So I understand a little bit about the subject, but not as much as you. So we're lucky to have you first. As always, with a guest here, we love to get a little bit of your journey being, in a world of stupid men.
Oh, I don't know about that, but no, thank you so much, Nick. So, I mean, just starting off a little bit about me. So, born and bred in Virginia. I was raised in Southern Virginia by a single mother. It was kind of a rural farming community. My great grandparents played a tremendous role in my life because my mother worked a lot. She was a nurse. So, while she was working, I was often with my great grandparents. And really, I credit my mom and my great grandparents a lot in the way that I was raised, because I think it was pretty progressive at the time, but they never treated me as you're a girl, so you have a very gender defined future, and this is how you should behave, and this is how you should act. Or no, it was nothing like that. I can tell you that I'm an only child, and I was really raised with all the opportunities that any of us would want to have, and what do you want to be, what interests you. And so, kind of jumping ahead, in high school, I knew that I was interested in this emerging concept called Homeland Security, and 9/11 had just happened. So I graduated high school in 2004. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but we have to think of, that's only 3 years after 9/11. So a lot of me becoming a young adult was heavily influenced by 9/11. And I wanted to either go into the military. I was very interested in perhaps going to the U.S. Naval Academy, and I was very interested again in Homeland Security as a topic. And I was lucky in that here in Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University was one of the first. I think it may have actually been the first kind of U.S. Department of Homeland Security seed college, where they created the country's first Bachelor of Arts in Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. And I went through the program. I had some wonderful contacts. They had some great mentors there. Colonel Bill Parrish was instrumental in kind of shaping who I became as a Homeland Security professional, and the networking of contacts. And I feel like forever indebted to my education and the learning and the background that I got at Virginia Commonwealth University. And my contacts there actually got me my first internship, which was in the Governor's Office of Commonwealth Preparedness, OCP as it was called at the time in Virginia. And I started out as an intern, kind of lowest person on the totem pole type deal. I started out in interoperable communications, actually, with narrowbanding and P25 compliance, and kind of all of those challenges that first responders were having directly following 9/11. And we knew that there was a lot of work to do there in terms of getting folks to use common language protocol. But I eventually, long story short, in the governor's office, worked my way up. I survived a gubernatorial transition, which is pretty difficult to do, in that when governors transition and they change shop, they normally bring in their own people. I was lucky in that Governor Bob McDonnell kept me on, and he actually promoted me to Critical Infrastructure Protection Coordinator for the Commonwealth of Virginia, which was a tremendous role and a tremendous responsibility at the time for someone that was only a few years into their career at the time. But I learned so much learning traditional critical infrastructure protection, identifying those infrastructures of state and national significance, and then working with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to systemically understand and buy down risk to those assets. I also was trained in emergency management at the time, trained in nuclear first response as well. So even though it was a smaller office, I got visibility into a lot of different areas. And it was honestly, I could not at this day and age have imagined kind of a better launching pad for my career. After the governor's office, I was recruited by General Electric to help them with their product security incident response team and writing response plans and standing up and conducting tabletop exercises. And then Rockwell Automation recruited me to lead both product safety and security for their products. Actually, it was unique in that that office had those together. And now I'm at Schneider Electric, and I'm the Chief Product Security Officer supporting energy management for Schneider Electric. And the cool thing about my job, and kind of what was absolutely a must for me, was that it was a lot to get me to leave the government. I'll tell you that, because for a long time, I thought of myself as a career civil servant. I wanted to stay working in kind of the Department of Homeland Security, state level emergency management sphere. when the private sector called me, it took a lot to get me to leave. And the only reason why I left was because I knew that there were so many opportunities emerging in the private sector where I could still feel like I was contributing to security on a global level, and I could still work with U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Department of Energy and others. So, it's just been a tremendous journey so far. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, that's very impressive. Of course, what you've learned in those years has been instrumental to your career today. And a lot of people, I guess, don't really understand what it takes to manage all the critical infrastructure around us. Can you maybe tell us in I guess as simply as possible what industrial control systems are?
Sure. And thank you, Nick. And so it's a very bloated statement nowadays, and that you hear this critical infrastructure protection, industrial control systems, SCADA this, SCADA that, operational technology, ITOT convergence. I mean, that's all you hear about nowadays, and for good cause, right? But to answer your question succinctly, industrial control systems are products and systems that exist in industrial environments that help control a process. And so that could be anything from human machine interfaces to sensors to temperature gauges to programmable logic controllers. It is all of those things in that industrial environment that are powering a process. So think of a car manufacturing line, or a manufacturing line that is making pharmaceuticals or food or ice cream or energy, or you name it. If it's an industrial or an operational process, it involves industrial control systems. And when you think of critical infrastructure, all critical infrastructure runs off of industrial control systems. If you're a dam, ICS and SCADA are controlling the locks that automate the flow of water within the dam. Hydroelectric, pharma, manufacturing, I mean, roller coasters even. Everything is powered by ICS. And so from a critical infrastructure protection standpoint, they are truly the heart and the lungs of critical infrastructure, not just within the United States, but globally.
Yeah, and you kind of described it very well, and I think a lot of people also think of ICS as legacy systems. Of course, many of them are pretty old, and in fact, we have the former Schneider Electric CISO here on the show, apparently joining us as a guest. Igor, welcome. And so you when you see the ICS systems, right? Of course, you're dealing with a lot of legacy systems, no doubt, but even a new dam or a new uh, grid company starting tomorrow will have ICS systems, new, but still consider ICS. So it's kind of a myth to think of ICS only as legacy systems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, typically, when you think of legacy, you think of what the industry calls like brownfield environments. They're existing customers where you have existing control systems, SCADA set up. And then I think what you're referring to is greenfield. Greenfield is everything new that's currently being built, and everything is becoming more digitized.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you look at, of course, the complexity of those ICS systems, what makes them different when it comes to traditional IT, and you compare kind of our laptops or the servers running on the cloud, hosting this engagement today, for example, compared to what you would see on the ICS SCADA side.
Sure. So on the ICS SCADA side, it is all about, number one is safety. It all revolves around safety. Secondly, it's also availability. These systems are installed, they're operating, they're running. If you take a power plant, for example, we can use this as kind of the backdrop of the conversation. That power plant is maybe going on shutdown 3 or 4 times a year, once a quarter for 48 to 72 hours. And that's basically your maintenance window for doing all your patching or double checking your configurations, anything that you would need to do to secure or shore up or make that environment more resilient. You're doing it within that tight time window. And outside of that, due to safety concerns, regulatory concerns, and other rule sets in place, you're pretty limited in your ability to make changes in that environment. In the IT side of the house, confidentiality and integrity in the CIA triad come first. Whereas in the operational technology environment, to make it very basic, we always say that availability of the asset comes first. We need to have visibility into the assets that are running, meaning we need to understand all the processes and the products that are on and are conducting their processes in real time. We need to be able to see that from a reliability and a safety standpoint. And even more important than that is that we need to have control over those devices, and there needs to be predictability within that system so that the process can do its thing and it can run. But we're also ensuring that the right levels of safety and control are in place for the human operators that would be at that site as well. And of course, with IT, you have much more flexibility, and availability is not so much of a conversation that we continue to have in IT as it is in OT, but it's definitely all about, one, again, safety, and secondly, availability of the devices. And again, you're looking at very tight maintenance windows, 48 to 72 hours, that operators within the environments have at any given time to make adjustments and improvements in the environment, versus within IT, we can do what's called hot patching. If you need to, patch your desktop or whatever you need to do, Nick, you're going to let that run, and you're not terribly concerned about whether or not the computer is going to start back up, or if it's going to have a problem with that patch, or if it's going to somehow conflict drastically with the system. In OT, those are real concerns.
Yeah, no doubt. You don't want to lose power every 5 minutes. That would be pretty bad. And obviously the goal is to kind of separate, right, the business side of the house running on traditional IT systems with the critical infrastructure side running on the ICS SCADA systems. And you've seen recently, right, so many attacks, right, going after dams and water facilities, power grid, and other things. Recently, there was a Colonial pipeline hacked. Although most people, when we had to shut down the pipeline for 5 days, and you start to see, the price of gas on the East Coast go crazy. Most people thought that the pipeline itself, the SCADA system or the ICS, got hacked, but in fact, it was just the bidding system that got hacked. Ideally, your ICS should not be connected to the internet. Although we know that smaller teams, because of lack of funding, have no choice but to have people remotely do some kind of support slash maintenance on those systems, and often end up using pretty cheap options to do that remotely. But you've seen even people target the business side of the house with the Colonial pipeline, and yet that had an impact, a tangible impact on the production of the pipeline, because they couldn't bill people, so they had to shut it down. So the tie coupling is, and the risk is pretty insane regardless. And so when you look at kind of that environment of business slash IT OT like you're talking about, it's a pretty tightly coupled concept, but yet you're supposed to be able to separate the two, right?
Correct. And, there's a lot of debate across industry right now. I mean, obviously, you don't want, you could have data coming up from your OT environment that helps inform decisions being made on the IT side. We definitely see that. And we see that this is the direction that everything is heading in. What you want to avoid, though, is you want to avoid the connectivity from the IT side directly coming back into the OT environment without a proper DMZ in place there. That being said, you do see that a lot of attacks in the OT environment are secondary or tertiary attacks that actually begin in the IT environment, where an attacker can get persistence in that IT environment and then get headway to move into the OT environment. So we have seen that. We also see a lot of what I call direct exposure in the OT environments, where asset owners may have a human machine interface or an engineering workstation directly connected to the internet. Somehow something went wrong and someone left the device incorrectly configured, and it's talking to the internet. And when it has that direct exposure, that's basically what we call a beachhead. That's a beachhead for attackers to get directly into your OT system. They would not have even needed to leverage your IT environment to move laterally. And so we do see that as well. And just, just a personal branding thing about myself and attacks and the way that the industry talks about attacks in OT environments. I never I never point the finger at other asset owners or other customers or competitors or anyone in the space, because back where I come from, we have a saying that says, you today, me tomorrow. And so we never we want to act like we know our stuff in cybersecurity, all of us, but we never want to act like know-it-alls. And so that's just a personal brand with me on the way that we communicate and talk about problems in the industry.
Yeah, particularly I think with the critical infrastructure, the state of cyber is pretty bad overall. I think it'll be pretty cautious not to make fun of others. That's pretty scary. All right, so you came up with this great idea of incident common system for ICS. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, and thank you, Nick, because this is really a topic that I'm very passionate about. So a few minutes ago, I kind of described my journey into working in industrial cybersecurity, but I started out actually as an emergency manager. And within emergency management, all of us within the United States are trained on the National Incident Management System, NIMS, and a strong component of NIMS is the Incident Command System. So Incident Command System kind of has its origin in the 1970s with the California wildfires, where many different fire departments and EMS and others were having to come together to meet in California. And, you know, departments from other states, even, and the federal government, they were having to come together to respond to very large wildfires that covered large geographic distances and required many different types of functions and emergency responders to come into play to successfully respond and recover from the fire. And so they built Incident Command System under the premise that you have a common organizational structure with common language and common roles, so that if I need to call Nick and say, Nick, I need you here tomorrow, I need your skills to help run this incident, Nick could come in and not know anything about my company and serve as an incident commander or a planning section chief. And he's going to know how to do that job and what's expected and how to work within an organizational structure and report to an incident commander and what that reporting structure looks like and what the common language looks like, so that he can do the job regardless of the organization that he's come from. And a good example of this is that all local fire departments and police already follow this system. So a firefighter type 2 in Powhatan County, Virginia, is the same thing as a firefighter type 2 in Miami-Dade County down in Florida. And so it gives you consistency for roles and responsibilities, and it gives you just common rule sets, things that you wouldn't think of, like span of control, right? When you're running a cyber incident, you shouldn't have 30 people reporting to one person. That's setting them up for failure, and it's setting the folks that are reporting them up to failure. What you really want to have is a span of control for any one person that is 3 people minimum, 7 being the most, with 5 being optimal, okay? And during an incident, the people that you report to on a day-to-day basis, say you're in comms, say you're a marketing person, but you're supporting a cyber incident, you're not going to report to that same functional manager, you know, your director of communications or whatever. You're going to report up through the incident commander, so that during that incident, you're not doing your day job. You are just working the incident. And so Incident Command System solves for common language, it solves for resource constraints, it solves for accountability, and it just gives us all a common way to work together. Because today, if you've been involved in cyber incident response, there is no common language. I mean, every company has their own playbooks, they have their own structure. And I'm not arguing that anything is wrong with what any individual organization or company has built. If it's serving them, it's great, and you should continue that. What we're really talking about is an overarching structure that can be used on top of what you have to better coordinate with other companies, to offer mutual aid, to be able to better coordinate with the federal government, which also uses this same system. So it's just a better way for all of us to use the, quite frankly, limited number of resources that we have.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because it's almost like an abstraction layer, like we would do, you know, for cloud providers, to separate ourselves from the vendor locking aspect of each different cloud provider, so you can effectively work anywhere and have the knowledge that you need no matter where you are, and and it's kind of a decoupling of things, and so that way you can have different people in the same jobs and be able to take over overnight if need be. That's a pretty cool concept. So I guess when you look at the the things that ICS for ICS gave us, there's this kind of overarching universe of construct, and then kind of that abstraction to make sure that anyone can do those roles. What else, I guess, am I missing in terms of the benefits that you brought to the table that didn't exist before?
Sure. I mean, I think scale, scale, scale is the name of the game on
Mm-hmm.
this one. So I've often said that if I were in a role like Jen Easterly's at CISA, you recognize that if we know that 85% of critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector, then we can take that same logic and say that roughly 85% of our cyber response force is within the private sector. And we
Mm-hmm.
have no way to effectively access 85% of our response force, which to me, that's a loss, and it's also an opportunity. So what this gives us is a direct connection point and a framework of interoperability for responses to work and better amplify government response efforts when there are mass and wide scale cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. I worry often about surge capacity. We've seen with cyber attacks, say if one asset was attacked in one state, but then we saw follow-on attacks, and we know that government resources and state and local and the company itself mainly, they're consuming resources to respond to the event. What is our surge capacity? I'm confident that we could handle a few of these, but what do we think that answer would be if we really needed to scale as a nation in our response? And not just for the United States. This applies to any country. Is how confident are you in being able to identify, have a good appreciation for the number and scale of cyber responders you have, and then be able to actually operationalize them in a timely manner to respond with the whole of nation response? That's what ICS for ICS gives you. Is it gives you scale, and it gives you surge capacity, and it also gives you consistency.
Yeah, no, that's so impressive. That's really a game changing aspect. Do you see this, like you said, you talk about the international aspect of this? Do you think more nations are looking at adopting similar models so we could potentially share and learn across nations?
Yes, and they are. So if you look at if you look at our global membership, we're right at around 1,500 global volunteers right now, and it's being driven out of the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance. Thank you, ISA GCA, by the way, in partnership with U.S. Department of Homeland Security. But I would be remiss to tell you that a good portion of our membership also comes from international communities. We've seen tremendous interest from the governments of Australia as well as New Zealand that are examining this. So you see, if you're coming from the U.S. View, the Five Eye nations are all looking at this and looking to adopt it. We have great volunteers in the UK, Ireland, France. The rest of Europe is definitely paying attention to this.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a game changing concept if that can scale across NATO and across Five Eye. That's a pretty big achievement right there. So
And I will say real quick, United Nations has already endorsed incident command system. We're trying to get in front of the United Nations so that they're aware of ICS for ICS as well. But the structure has already been endorsed.
wow, nice, amazing. So a lot of people were asking, what's the process to become a credentialed first responder? Most people don't know what it takes to get there.
Sure, and great question. And so what Nick is referring to here is that within the ICS for ICS process, I mentioned earlier the idea of a type 2 firefighter is the same in one locality in one state as it is, all the way across the country, right? There's consistency in the training that individual has, and not only their training, but the fact that they've had supervisors and other people that have been present in their responses be able to vouch that yes, I saw Nick and he was there and he performed these duties and he did a great job. And I'm going to sign my signature saying that I've seen him successfully perform these duties in this role. And so that is what the credentialing process is about, is very similar to how firefighters are credentialed or paramedics and EMS. We are saying that essentially you are a cyber first responder, a planning section chief, an incident commander, an operations section chief, a malware reverse engineer. We are saying that we have an official process in place through ICS for ICS and the ISA GCA, where number one, we formed an adjudication committee. And this committee will meet and it will review individual applications to become credentialed in ICS for ICS for a particular role. And so to date, we have credentialed people as type 1 incident commanders, which is kind of the very top of the ICS for ICS org structure. So I am certified as a type 1 incident commander, which means that I have taken the FEMA training. To answer your question succinctly through kind of this backdrop, is that I had to prove several FEMA courses that I had taken. Most of them are available online. And by the way, the best part is that they're free. So you could take the FEMA courses, and then the last course that someone has to take to be a type 1, you would need to take an in-person course through like your local Department of Emergency Management or local emergency services. They offer it a few times a year or more, and you take that final course. But for most of the roles, an in-person course is not required. I think it's 5 or 6 online FEMA courses, the NIMS, ICS 700, 800, and there's a few more. We have this list, and we can certainly hand this information out after this event. But it's a few online courses, and then you fill out a form, and you have your former supervisors or folks that you worked with that were there and can basically vouch on their honor that they saw you perform these tasks and that they believe that you are worthy of meeting the requirements to be a credentialed malware reverse engineer or a planning section chief. There are many, many, many different roles that will need to be built out for people to become credentialed in. But essentially, take the training, fill out the form, the adjudication committee meets. It's a collection of us, so it's not just Megan or Andre Restano or someone individually making a determination on you. It's a collective group of experts that have formed to kind of be neutral people that don't know anything about you, to look at your information and say, yes, they did it, or no, we need more information, or could you clarify this point? And then what would you need to successfully complete it if you can't get it the first time?
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So, and I have so many questions from the audience, but before I bring them up, I have a couple more myself. So I'm going to be selfish here.
Okay.
So, I was the first chief software officer for the Air Force and Space Force, so kind of a new title. Now we have quite a few people using the CSO title. You have a pretty unique title that I had never heard before, at least before meeting you, which is the Chief Product Security Officer. What does that mean? What is that role is about? What do you do?
Sure. So thank you. And it's a great question. So CPSOs, we are kind of the new kids on the block. So 15 or 20 years ago, everybody was standing up CISOs, right? And today, I think all Fortune 500 companies, everybody has a CISO. That's standard. You're going to have a Chief Information Security Officer. CISOs have traditionally been concerned with protection of the company's brand as a whole, its enterprise networks, the way its IT operations functioned, many things that CISOs are very familiar with handling that help the company function and protect the company from cyber attacks on a day-to-day basis. Product security officers are focused really on what does the company build that is an intelligent product that it is selling and providing to customers. So we're concerned with the product. So for my company and for myself, I work within energy management. So my business sells thousands of different types of products, anything from meters to relays to very intelligent cloud platforms like EcoStruxure. And so with that, we are baking security into those embedded products, software products, cloud, and application products. So this is your secure development lifecycle on one side of the coin, kind of how you securely develop, deploy, and work with your customer on the security lifecycle of your product. As well as the other side of the coin, which many people leave out this part, is it's not just about your SDL, but it's also about the security features and the functionality that you bake into your product that really go a long way in terms of helping to secure the product in its perpetuity while it lives within the customer environment. So we're very customer focused. It's almost like, imagine if security were a product management function. It's the intersection of a lot of cool things. It's marketing, it's design, it's architecture, it's engineering. Many people call it, in fact, security engineering, which I think is kind of a cool term for it. But we get to work with so many different parts of the organization. And so CPSOs, I love the role. It is emerging. We are the new kid on the block. But I'll bet you this. I bet you this, Nick. I bet in 10 years, I bet that every Fortune 500 has a chief product security officer, or sometimes I even hear them being termed like vice president of customer trust. It's sometimes being framed in terms of that way, but whatever this role ends up being called, head of security engineering or chief product security officer or customer trust, whatever we name on whatever we land on in terms of naming and convention, every Fortune 500 company is going to have one of us in 10 or 15 years. We're going to follow the same history as CISOs, I bet.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I love it. I think it's so. So when you look at the portfolio you have, right? It's a lot of different. You talk about thousands of different hardware, and even you talk about cloud capabilities. So when you look at the complexity, right? Are you looking at both the hardware security and the software security side of things?
Yes.
Yeah, that obviously adds a lot of complexity. I had to deal enough with the nightmare of the software the software side, but when you start touching OT capabilities and sensors and IoT, cyber was always kind of a forgotten thing bolted on after the fact. And you talked about the baked in component, right? So you are able to work with your teams to really think about the design of the product itself before it's released, to make sure that the features in the product have that baked in security, whether it's encryption, whether it's proper ways to communicate with the device, whether it's dashboards that are secure, and identity management and all these kind of things.
Exactly. And if anyone, so we're an IEC 62443 shop. So 62443 is by far the most widely recognized. It's the strongest standard. It's the hardest to meet standard in industrial control system security. So we build to that spec. So if you're a customer and you're interested in buying product from us, we certify and we're compliant to that spec. And it's really neat because 4-1 covers secure development. 4-2 covers kind of security features that should be in individual products, and 3-3 even covers the system level. So we find that it's a really good view from kind of a vendor supplier standpoint, but it's also a standard that's interoperable with our customers, and that I'm not speaking, again, going back to the common language, I'm not speaking a different language with them. If they use 62443 to write their security requirements, what they're looking for in their system, I find that it's a very easy standard to follow to follow as well from the asset owner standpoint.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of obviously the sensor level all the way to the full system of systems and kind of things connecting with each other and creating kind of a whole capability. Maybe if you could give a couple of examples on what the outcome for the customer would be using your product line. What are they trying to achieve?
Sure. So for Schneider Electric, our customers are concerned in a few different areas. Building management systems could be one of them. They could want to be measuring and understanding energy consumption and load balancing, as well as areas that they could save on energy and move more towards decarbonization in their environment. So for our products, it's all about optimization of the energy that customers are using so that they can reduce their energy bill, but they're also contributing back in a positive way by lowering their carbon which helps all of us and helps the planet and the environment.
Yeah, that's very cool. And what else? You talk about building management system. I assume there is. Do you also go down to the lower level, like the grid piece of things, like the management of the actual power?
Sure, yes. So we definitely have products such as ADMS and others that help monitor and help utility companies like Dominion Energy or Duke or others understand how power is flowing through the grid and how in some areas substations and other parts within the distributed grid infrastructure, how they can relay and share information again for the optimization of energy itself.
Yeah,
So we
very
do.
cool.
We're all over. We're in substations, we're in commercial buildings, we're in hospitals, we're in data centers. Anywhere energy is managed and consumed, you can find Schneider Electric. I almost feel like I should start like a new branding on that. Anywhere energy is consumed is where you can find us.
Yeah. I mean, clearly energy is everywhere, so you're touching pretty much every vertical on the planet. That's pretty cool. So when you look at the complexity of that, right, and of course with your background in incident response, do you also work on some product that facilitate the incident response process for those customers when they see, downtime or any kind of issue?
Absolutely. So one thing we always look for, so if you're going in to run an incident response in a customer environment, I get this asked a lot, what are one of the first things that you would look for coming into an operational technology environment? Well, we're going to be looking for logs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We want the logs so that we can understand what was communicating with what, when, and what happened. And so we'd be looking to pull logs from products. And in many cases, for instance, we partner with the cybersecurity company Clarity. We also partner with Nozomi. They sell products that have a centralized cyber management function that are going to be ingesting those logs. They're going to be looking for traffic on the network to do intrusion detection. They're going to look at network patterns to understand, oh, this is normal behavior versus no, this is anomalous behavior, and this is traffic that we're not familiar with, and this is an alert that we need to take a closer look at to understand, is something going on with the equipment? Is there a fault with the equipment? Or is this, truly kind of a nefarious actor that's somehow on the network and we need to stop it?
Yeah,
In
and
many
those.
cases, I will say, Nick, what makes it hard in operational technology environments, even when you have the logs and the data and you have the visibility into the environment, in many cases, to someone responding on the IT side, if they got the information in front of them, they may not know if something is like a fault with the equipment or if it's a true cyber attack. And I call this, in the OT environment, it's a very scientific term. It's called JDLR, just doesn't look right. And so that's, in many cases, you experience just doesn't look right. And then it needs to be further investigated to determine, you need to rule out faults first. And you have to assume it could be cyber until you can rule out cyber as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's the tools you mentioned. Obviously, a lot of people are very well aware of the traditional SIEMs and SOARs used for log and taking action when it comes to the traditional IT side of the house. But those are also specific to OT systems because they have to look at the behavior of those, which are pretty unique and usually require specific companies to go after these kind of logs and understanding of the product, right?
Absolutely. You're exactly right. And it also has to deal with the communications protocols that the products are using to communicate with one another. So DNP3 or Modbus or EGD, there are many, many, many protocols out there, some of which are proprietary, where you need to have a specialized tool that's going to be able to interrogate that communications protocol and really understand what's happening on the wire.
Yeah, that's a whole different world from the basic TCP/IP we have to deal with in traditional IT stuff. The world of IT is so much easier than the OT side, that's for sure. So someone was asking. I'm going to take one question from the public before we keep going with more of my questions. But someone was asking, how much do you know about what's going on in the Canadian ICS cyber efforts. A lot of people are saying Canadians are kind of, yeah, at the very least, leading or at least pushing very hard on cyber best practices when it comes to ICS. What have you seen from coming from our friends up north?
Sure. So funny enough, many of the US based ICS conferences I attend, they have a good representation of stakeholders from Canadian critical infrastructure. So my first observation is that the Canadian and the US ICS security communities are very linked. Okay. I can also tell you that Canada, the folks that I've talked to are also following IEC 62443, again, that international IEC standard. Um, and I'm trying to think if there's anything more kind of significant or remarkable that I would say other than I see the Canadians at our conferences. They're great people. They follow IEC 62443, and we're pretty consistent coordination with them. So I guess I don't have anything that defines their program as different or more challenging or less challenging. I think that we're kind of in the same boat with the Canadians, and they're our friends in cybersecurity too.
Right, right.
Sorry, I feel like maybe I didn't add, a lot
No,
of depth
that's
to my
fine.
response, but
No, that's fine. If there's nothing, there's nothing. You can't just create it off thin air. So, all right. So a lot of people, you did mention the ISA Global Cyber Alliance, but most people don't know what it is. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
no, sure, I'm happy to. So the ISA stands for International Society of Automation, because we love acronyms, but it's ISA, and it is the home of the IEC 62443 standard that's international. And so ISA has training, it has the home of the standards, it's home of writing the standard. If you're an engineer that likes writing standards, ISA is the home of all things industrial automation. And it's been that way, I think, for over 60 years. They would probably be embarrassed that I can't remember the year the ISA was founded, but it's been around a very long time, and it's a very, very, very respected organization. 62443 was in the works and took, I think, over 10 years to write, with kind of heads down, best in the world security engineers working on this. And so they're very proud of the work that they do because they are so diligent and they're serious about it. And it's not just people, slapping a Word document together. This is the real deal. So number one, that's what ISA is. And it's very large. They have thousands and thousands of members, not just within the United States, but globally. Very large organization of engineers. The Global Cybersecurity Alliance. So about 3 years ago, my boss, Klaus Yockley, who is the Chief Product Security Officer for all of Schneider Electric, he got together with Rockwell Automation at the time, and he said, we're both two companies that are very committed to 62443. We believe that it's the right time to get the right companies together to promote the further adoption of the standard. And so Schneider Electric and Rockwell Automation and Honeywell and Johnson Controls and a few others more came together, and we stood up and we formed the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance. But we're a collection, I think, we're well over 50 companies now. You have most of your industrial automation suppliers and vendors, the Schneider Electrics, the Rockwell Automations, the Johnson Controls, the Honeywells, the Clarities, the Nozomis, the Idaho National Labs. There are so many great stakeholders that contribute to critical infrastructure protection, not just within the United States, but globally, and we're all members. And we have different working groups. You're not forced to join all working groups. You join the working groups that you feel most passionate about contributing to. And we put our best staffers on there to work on complex problems that we feel like tackling for the industry. So obviously ICS for ICS is housed at the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance, but we also do sector profile work. DOE just announced today that we have been working with them and ABB Hitachi. Actually, two competitors partnered to help create a template for a security profile for substations, so that we begin to see some consistency and some specificity in the way that, again, that security is being directly baked into the products and the systems going into a substation. And we did it together with ISA, with ABB, because it's the right thing to do. So that's what we are. We are all about the adoption of 62443. While we're developing a profile now for substations, we're going to do the same thing for building automation. We're going to do the same thing for low voltage switchgear. We have several different profiles that people have said, hey, 62443 is great as a horizontal. Let's dig down into my segment and write a profile that's going to help guide security in this area. And so it's great work. It's great. It's work that has depth. The projects that we work on have real impact. And really, it's great for networking. And it's a great group of people that honestly care and dedicate their time. So if you haven't heard about the GCA, check them out, Google us. And, hopefully many folks listening to this will at least want enough information that they'll dig a little bit deeper and, maybe even decide to join us.
Yeah, no doubt. Hopefully, I think a lot of people are very interested about what you're talking about. So I'm getting a lot of private messages about how would they get started, understanding better what, in fact, someone was mentioning this here. Can you suggest some avenues for someone to get started in ICS? You mentioned the FEMA training. Is there other things that could help people to get started?
Sure. And it depends on the ICS they're talking about, right? If it's incident command system, then yes, the FEMA training and Googling, and there's tons of content out there. And really the same also with the industrial control systems aspect. And there's tons of free information online. You can Google about 62443. It's going to have information as well. There's many white papers. Clarity comes out with white papers. We've come out with white papers in the space, Nozomi, others. So it's not for lack of content, I would say. But I think where people do struggle is they just want someone to bounce ideas off of, or they don't know kind of what their next step is, or they feel maybe a little bit intimidated by the industry because it is emerging, right? And because it's a cross section of a lot of different disciplines. But sometimes people just need someone to talk to figure out what their next step is too. And we're always open to that at the GCA, and I am personally as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's see. I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to pick the good ones. Okay. All right. So here we go. So Alex was talking about, looking at the different priorities compared to other environments. You were talking about, safety, availability, and everything else comes after that, and the sheer number of dependencies between components. How much of the model-based system engineering methods are being used in ICS? And for people that don't know what MBSC is, it's kind of the ability to create a digital twin or replica of a system, so you can emulate and simulate different situations, so you could see exactly how the system would behave before bending metal, before putting it in front of a specific use case, and have the wind and whatever else come into effect, and see how the system would behave. We use that for jets and bombers and space systems and other things a lot to move faster, so we know exactly how the system would behave before we even build the prototype. I'm not sure how much MBSC is used in ICS at all.
So I believe that it is, although a lot of it may not be as automated. So there's tons of testing that every single product goes through just outside of cyber, right? There's fault testing, there's safety testing, there's tons of testing that is required just to ship a product, especially if you're operating within an industrial control systems environment. And you have to think of in-country laws for that safety testing as well. And so at a minimum, the products and systems are already meeting that. So I think the question that was being asked was more in the realm of kind of a cyber focused, on top of all the things that a product's going to have no matter what. From a cybersecurity standpoint, what could this look like? And this is actually a phase within the industrial automation security lifecycle. Sorry, that took me a second, but it is an official part of the 62443 process, where you have validation and verification of the security controls that are within a system before the system is officially handed over to a customer. And sometimes this is part of what's called facility acceptance testing. to ensure that the configurations are correct, that kind of the security checklist, if you will, that the ports have been closed, that all of this good work has been done in advance to saying done. So it's a V&V work in terms of modeling and digital twins. Yes, companies have this, and they're definitely interested in it because they're interested in understanding the interoperability of the products as well as the data. General Electric actually had an interesting project where they created a digital twin from a cybersecurity standpoint called Digital Ghost, and that's public information. You can Google it. They've done many talks. It's many videos on YouTube about what that is. But essentially, as you would baseline in normal process anomalies outside of cyber to understand a system, as you would make a digital model of any given system to understand what that baseline for normal is, you could do that in cyber, understanding again what that baseline of normal is. And Clarity and Nozomi have products that do this within the context of OT environments as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's pretty cool. See, a lot of people think of OT as the old boring stuff, but it's not. There's so much innovation going on and so much new concept. In fact, Igor, the former CISO of Schneider Electric, was asking about, most organizations still treat IT and OT risk as separate domains. Do you believe in converging OT and IT risk management and governance I can say that. And how do you recommend leaders approaching this topic in the organizations?
Sure. So I think number one, it depends on the organization. I think that different setups can work fine in different organizations, and I don't get hung up so much on kind of one organization like governance versus product versus offer management. I don't really, or CIOs. I don't get too hung up on kind of the organizational reporting methodology. In my mind, it's really about three things. It's about surfacing risk. Number one, what is the risk that we need to surface it? Secondly, what is the risk? What is our understanding of this risk? What is our analysis? And thirdly, what are we doing about it? What's the remediation? And so to me, those three items can be reported up to boards and decision makers. It doesn't depend on the organization. Do I believe that IT and OT risks can be surfaced and analyzed and then shared and reported up after remediation, or if you decide not to remediate or accept the risk? Sure, it can all go up to the same place, and it should ultimately, because the whole point of doing risk analysis is to provide decision makers with maneuver room and understanding what options are available to them in understanding and ultimately remediating that risk. So if risk remediation is your ultimate goal, I don't see why they couldn't be reported and surfaced and remediated together. I think that different teams at the end of the day may be responsible for the remediation and kind of taking care of that risk, but how that's reported up to leadership or understood, I don't know that that's a sticking point.
Yeah, I think I guess some of the belief, is to make sure that you've seen the example of the Colonial Pipeline, where the IT effectively, forced people to shut down the OT side because of the billing system being hacked. So effectively, the IT risk could spread and impact the OT side of the house, right?
Yes. And I think that ideally you would have the right set of decision makers together in the room to make that assessment. And again, it goes back to the you today, me tomorrow scenario. I don't think that it's illogical that if you have a certain degree of uncertainty on the IT side or on the OT side, that you cannot control that risk, or you can't estimate whether or not that risk may bleed into the other area, you've got a joint problem together that you need to solve for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of organizations can kind of have that separation of duties and kind of separate reporting between the OT and IT side. So if you had to advise leaders and organizations, would you say it is important at some point that kind of the information ends up merging into a single risk posture, so you're tracking the component risk of both sides of the table?
Yeah, absolutely. At an aggregate level, it's the same risk that needs to be boiled up and reported to the board and decision makers, regardless of where it sits within an organization. The aggregate view of both inherent risk as well as residual risk, it needs to be part of the same picture because it is part of the same picture.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so a couple of more questions here. Robert was asking, and maybe you know or don't know about it, but that's okay. At some point, there was a hack, might be only in the lab, to make rooms light flicker to trigger seizures. Have you seen something like that? Is that the kind of stuff that people pay attention to?
I haven't run into that one. I think it's a plausible attack, certainly in our imaginations, right? But I personally have never run into the old light flickering attack. And I don't mean to
Yeah.
make light of it because it could actually be a serious attack, right? And if a person has a condition that would make them more susceptible to lights changing and flickering, that is something to be taken seriously. But no, I have not heard of this one.
Yeah.
So I haven't gotten asked by any customers on that one.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, a lot of people were asking on Twitter, but I can bring it up on the screen. It's not synchronizing that way, but can you tell us about what keeps you up at night?
I would directly answer your question, make you laugh, but right now I have 2 kittens and they're keeping me up at night. I closed my bedroom door, but they're still trying to get in. I bring that up because that really happened last night and it's happened for the past few nights. But
That's a real
outside,
tangible one.
yeah, outside of kittens, I guess what concerns me or unmitigated risk is we need to see some consistency. In many cases, I see people kind of jumping towards silver bullets or kind of things that promise to really take the hard work out of cybersecurity for them and be that magic product that they're going to get to sleep well at night and not have to think about things. It doesn't exist. So, folks, we need to let the hard work of 62443 take place. We need steady administration. We need time to let the security features get into the products, into the OT environments of the future. I always tell people that we are trying to save the world 5 years from now, in many cases, in the next generation systems that we're building for Greenfield, as well as securing what exists today, because that's the inherent risk that we have to live with. But I worry a lot about direct exposure. There are many asset owners, and it's not their fault because this is hard and there's not enough cybersecurity people. So no finger pointing again, but they've got product directly exposed to the internet. So, I mean, at any time they can be attacked. I don't think that they would know that they were being attacked until their asset went offline. And then, of course, I deal with another scenario like we've seen from some attacks where there was an attack. It had a ton of publicity, but then the way that the public's reaction from it compounded the issue and created cascading supply chain impacts that I don't know could have necessarily been predicted. And so again, I worry about the public's reaction to events when they happen. I worry about the way that we communicate on the subject of cybersecurity. And I worry a little bit that within cybersecurity, there's somewhat of an elitist mentality, or we focus on being special and unique and having these skill sets that other people don't have. We're a discipline of security. We're actually a disaster science. We are not that much different than regular emergency managers. Again, surfacing risk, dealing with risk. So I worry about the issue of cybersecurity scaling, attacks, and us not having enough people to deal with it.
Yeah, so you definitely see a talent shortage in cyber in OT, right? Like we do, I guess, in IT as well. You feel a big talent shortage on the OT side as well?
Especially, I'd say the issue's compounded. So if you take everyone that's in cybersecurity as a population, maybe 10% of the total cybersecurity population has familiarity or specialty within the OT context.
Mm-hmm. So it's compounded.
It
Yeah.
is, and it's even more difficult for asset owners because if you think of the larger vendors of the world, we hire the right people to build security into our products. But if you're a medium-sized water utility, what are the chances that you're going to get the cyber talent that you need to successfully run that operation?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And I guess, when you look at the cyber state and what's going on now in the, critical infrastructure side of the house, obviously, you've seen, people react when there's a bad incident and maybe overreact, like you mentioned. But also, it's always interesting to me how quickly people move on, right? I mean, you've seen it with the Colonial Pipeline hack, right? We saw the gas almost disappear on the East Coast, and people freaking out because they were, going to the pump and trying to get as much as possible. And then, of course, it went back online and everybody moved on like nothing happened. I'm always surprised to see that, people keep saying that there's going to be some type of Pearl Harbor moment, or Sputnik moment when it comes to cyber and the OT side, and I see mini ones, and they kind of, you see people, paying attention to it, but then everybody moves on and everybody forgets about it, and I don't see a lot of, actions taking place after that. I think DHS and Jen has been doing a great job in the last couple of years to kind of raise awareness and spend more money and in partnership also with FEMA, go after the critical infrastructure partnerships on the private side, like you mentioned. 85+% is done on the commercial side. But do you feel like we're still kind of you know kind of diminishing the risk we're facing as a nation when it comes to just the grid and water and things like this?
I don't know. That's a tough one because I definitely see not only the US government reacting, but governments globally kind of taking heed and they're mobilizing and they're trying to get their arms around analyzing the risk out there and then coordinating proactively ahead of time with their private sector partners. So I mean, I think that everyone is taking this seriously. You often ask what more could be done. I'm not sure, but I do. Well, from the vantage point that I have, people are taking this seriously. I think it
When you
comes
say people,
down
you mean the
to
government, or you mean the people, the citizen?
the government's definitely taking it
Yeah.
seriously.
What about the citizen?
I think the vendors are definitely taking it seriously. I think the
Sure.
asset owners are taking it seriously. I think that we're still trying to get system integrators and folks that help us deploy this equipment. We're getting how do I say this correctly? We are at the point, I think, where we're trying to get critical mass of all the stakeholders that are involved in influencing the security of these ecosystems to get them on board. And again, I hate to go back to like the consistency of a standard like 62443, but that's kind of where we're at on a maturity spectrum. Is if you look at this on a spectrum of activity, people are definitely aware of the problem. So you have people taking action. The next step is that you need kind of a common standard or a common baseline to be following so that you can analyze the risk that you have and then take common measures that aren't kind of magic bullet, silver bullet type of stuff to get good security controls in. So I think that this is where we're at on the spectrum, is we're still analyzing the risk and putting the security controls in place. And then those security controls need to be able to have some time to do their job to see, did we move the needle? Are we in a better shape today than we were 5 years ago in terms of security capability within our infrastructures?
Yeah. And people on Twitter were asking if I mean, and we can always talk about it. I can also give my answer, but if you felt, foreign nations could potentially have access already, you mentioned a lot of the ICS systems, unfortunately, sometimes being internet facing, and maybe people wouldn't be aware until they are shut off. But maybe a lot of malicious actors could potentially sit on it, and China, Russia, or others could want to keep that under wrap for until it's the right time to shut it off, right? So do you feel it's possible that some nation states have already a footprint and access to some of the critical infrastructure systems, and potentially will turn it off when it's the right time to do so?
So I don't want to sound sensationalist, and I don't have this data, but what I can tell you is that there are lots of reports from credible sources, not just from the US government, not just from Europe or from Asia or anywhere else, that yes, we're seeing this type of activity. It's reconnaissance type activity where it doesn't matter if an APT, an advanced persistent threat, as we call them, APTs, if you are a target of theirs for whatever reason, they have deemed that they need to get a foothold inside of your environment, they want to study your environment for the ability to take action on those objectives later. Yes, we should all absolutely be behaving as if this intent is there and as if it is happening. And so that should be the level of awareness and the seriousness that any asset owner should take, is that you should assume that you're already a victim or that you could be. That's why zero trust architectures and this concept is so vitally important, is that it assumes that you've already been compromised.
Yeah, no doubt. And I guess a lot of people were asking for clarification as well, in terms of, when you said, people are doing a good job. Of course, the companies, the vendors, the government is starting to pay attention more and more. Congress is giving more funding. But do you feel like the citizens understand the risk we're facing, or is there still like a lack of understanding of the ICS risk when it comes to cyber?
Yes, so absolutely. And there will always be, because to be honest with you, cybersecurity is not, it's a pervasive element in all of our lives. However, I think that at some point as a society, we have to ask ourselves, what is the role of an everyday citizen and their kind of obligation as being a good member of society, right? And understanding how to use MFA and how to use just regular good cybersecurity hygiene in their own personal lives. And as a citizen in this society and going to work and logging in, or maybe even working in an operational technology environment, not necessarily viewing the human as the weakest link, because I think that that's kind of already kind of admitting defeat, right? But instead, we want to change the security culture as a whole, where we're viewing our people as a place in a lines of defense strategy. Your people are your first line of defense. So I think that, yes, common awareness is being raised generally throughout the public. However, and I think that people are trying to do their part. And every day, DHS and others put out good content on how people can do their part. To answer your question directly, do I think that they have like a true, real understanding of the threat as it exists today and what could happen? Probably not, no, but should they? And someone brought up a great quote at the RSA conference last year. And I think it stuck with me. They said, have we gone too far in some cases in that my kindergartner knows how to plug in a 9-character password, but he doesn't know his ABCs yet? I mean, really, have we gone too
far? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's always puzzling. Kids have a special brain, that's for sure.
But you get the point, right? You get the point in that, yes, we want a cyber informed and a cyber aware and individuals to be able to manage and understand cyber risk to them as a person and their families and their place within their employer's environment and all that. But also at the same time, as a community, how far do we take it? With the example of the kindergartner knowing a password before they know their ABCs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting. It's funny because it reminds me, when I started at DHS right after I became a U.S. citizen, that was 6 years ago. and my job was to create the cyber architecture for .gov and for the critical infrastructure side of the house. So I started pushing zero trust and all the good stuff. And we started to do assessments of some of the most critical systems out there. And I can tell you, after 2 months, I think that's when I started to become a prepper myself. And I started to buy a generator for my house, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna lose power. This is so bad. This is not good." I can tell you, my level of anxiety kind of rose up compared to what I was used to seeing on the commercial side, and what I've got to see, at DHS was so bad that I famously, I guess, called it the kindergarten level of cyber. And I get it, right? We're not blaming people or blaming companies or whatever, but the fact is, there's kind of a massive risk when at least any drastically improved in 6 years. I have to admit that, right? I think when you look back then, most people didn't really care. Now I think both, like you said, the vendors, the government, everybody, Congress, everybody is kind of waking up. Have you seen kind of a big shift in the last few years on the kind of the understanding and the awareness and the complacency aspect of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few years ago, industrial control system cybersecurity and product security, I mean, we weren't really visible, I think, to the larger cybersecurity community. We weren't necessarily being included in kind of the important policy discussions. That has definitely changed.
Yeah. And I guess Alex was asking also a great question. I don't know how much you know of what we've been pushing about DevSecOps and modern kind of software security best practices. You talk about zero trust, and we have kind of this whole pipeline model we created in DoD that then was open source and became kind of a good foundation for many of the banks and healthcare and retailers and telcos of the world and space companies and whatnot. But he was asking how let's take the first question first, and we'll go into the second piece. But how cloud friendly is the modern industrial control infrastructure? Do you see people start to kind of benefit from the cloud capability, or is it completely siloed? Are they just using it for the development side of the house, and then when it's time to run the system, there's absolutely zero connectivity with cloud, even for like stuff like, I don't know, logs sharing or aggregation of logs, or obviously that requires connectivity, so people might be concerned by that. But what do you see when it comes to IC and kind of the OT side of the house and cloud?
Sure. So if you pay attention to some of the executives in the field right now, they're saying that all roads will eventually lead to IT, that all data within the OT environment will eventually make its way in the future to the
Mm-hmm.
IT side of the house. And that's really this concept of the IT-OT convergence, which people have been talking about this IT-OT convergence for like 10 years. I don't know when the convergence is going to happen, but it's been being talked about for 6 years. I don't know. I think we're still in it, right? But within that, I don't disagree with the fact that the data from the OT environments can be harvested and can be better analyzed, and you can get efficiencies on the IT side of the house because you want insight into what's going on in the OT environment so that you can make better decisions, right? From a business standpoint, it's understanding that business model. We are becoming more cloud savvy. We are seeing more solutions being built, operating on the cloud, but in many cases, based on customer need, there'll also be an on-premise solution that's offered as well. DevSecOps. I love DevSecOps. It creates tremendous efficiencies in security as well as product development, getting product to market faster and more securely. I love concepts like vulnerability escape rates, automating a lot of the rules that we would want to put in place with the secure development lifecycle. Like you could say, this product will not release with any medium, high, or critical vulnerabilities. Like it's not even going to go to the next phase. Like there's some really cool technologies that are being put in place with DevSecOps tools, but it's also the mentality. It's the mentality of the developers and using agile sprints and cycles and placing more personal accountability at the developer level for understanding the code and the vulnerabilities and the defects in the code that need to be managed before anything else can happen. I think in traditional kind of waterfall development across industry, vulnerabilities tended to be handled closer to the time of the release of a product. Kind of, you've done all of this work, the product's almost ready to go, you're doing a pen test, and now we need to fix vulnerabilities before the product can release. With DevSecOps, that's happening constantly. It's happening several times a day. So it's definitely where development's going in the future. Unfortunately, for things like embedded, we're not going to have those same cool tools, right? But we can still have the same practices as individuals. And that's what I tell folks.
Yeah. And there's a lot more happening, when it comes to the embedded world. I see more and more, even space companies, started to have a full scale pipeline, and start to be able to emulate, different CPUs and different technologies on the cloud, and be able to run the test and the scanning and all these different things at scale. It's kind of a nascent thing, but it's happening slowly but surely. Do you feel like your company is kind of embracing kind of that DevSecOps benefit and return on investment? And do you feel like the leadership is actively promoting DevSecOps?
Yes, definitely. We would look very similar to other major players in the space in kind of embracing modern technology and DevSecOps. Yes, absolutely. And we have platforming of security as well. That's another emerging concept alongside DevSecOps that you see closely integrated here as well.
Yeah, very cool. And obviously, most people maybe don't know, but Schneider Electric is a French company, despite the name is not doesn't sound French. How is it working? I guess for a French company.
The travel's great. in all seriousness, no, it's great. It feels a lot like how I felt when I was at GE. It's a truly global company. I mean, it's pretty cool to wake up in the morning and to be able to have calls and meetings with people in Germany and France, and then your day goes on, and then around 2 o'clock, the France team is coming offline. Then you're having your meetings with the US teams as well. No, it's great working for Schneider Electric, and I love the global nature and the global challenge of the problem. My boss Bruno, and I always quote him, and he's always like, "Oh, you quoted me again," but I always say that my boss Bruno says that we earn the right to solve even more challenging problems when we solve the problems that we have today. So by solving problems today, we earn the right to solve even tougher problems tomorrow. So that's a very French mentality.
Yes. And funny enough, do you get 35 hours a week of work, or they don't give you the French work time?
Oh, I'm not going to comment on how much I work, but I
Because
it's
that's
about
also
the
a
same,
struggle
yeah.
for me. I can tell you, competing, when you have a team in France, and I had a pretty large team back in France with my companies, and then when we moved here to New York, right, I was shocked to see the difference, right? You probably get at least 2 months of vacation a year in France, and you get 35 hours weekdays, and you get countless I guess of holidays, and it's just mind-boggling. And then here, the sick days and everything is so different, right? It's always interesting for me to compare, the kind of the US, at will contract kind of mentality with the French, contract, that when you hire someone, it's almost impossible unless they start killing somebody to fire someone in France. It's just a nightmare, but it's always fun to me to compare. I guess usually French companies that have employees in the US have US laws for the US employees, and the French employees have the French laws, and German employees have the German laws. So I used to have 12 countries. So I had to learn all the painful differences between Dubai and Latin America and Europe and the US the hard way, because you always make mistakes and you don't realize all the cultural differences between all the nations and the laws. And so it's always fun.
Well, I will tell you, I think that it is the differences that makes the company stronger as a collective, though.
Mm-hmm.
especially
Interesting.
especially when it comes to engineering. I mean, you have the best and the brightest minds from the US, from France, from Asia. You have the best people, regardless of geography, working on a common problem and different ways of thinking about things. So They have tapped into that special sauce.
And do you feel like the U.S. side of the business is kind of growing? Are they hiring in the U.S. right now?
I think we're hiring everywhere. I think
Yeah,
the company's growing all around.
yeah, that's awesome. And when it comes to guidance to people in terms of what to learn and what to focus on in their journey of learning, what are you focusing on yourself to continuously kind of reinvent yourself? Are you learning something new in the last couple of months that you want to share with the group?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So I've been diving into post quantum encryption,
Mm,
or
nice.
post quantum resistant encryption, we should really say, because I'm learning just within the past month or two, really truly what quantum encryption is. Quantum encryption is different than post quantum resistant encryption, for
Mhm.
example. And so I'm all about post quantum right now. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Actually, the government is working on releasing a whole set of guidance on with the IC on quantum proof crypto stuff. That's going to be fun. I think it's been delayed always because of some legal nonsense, but it's going to come out pretty soon. I guess for me, what I've been learning is flying a plane. I'm getting my license to fly planes, and it's a lot of work. You learn a lot of things. I guess it's not technical for once,
And
but I mean, I guess
where
it's
is it?
technical. It's a
Where is
different
it
kind of
that
technical.
you're located, Nick? Flying that plane?
Yeah, you don't want to be close to me,
I'm
that's for
just
sure. I'm next to the Shenandoah Park, so we have the beautiful mountains, so that's very nice. But it's also a little bit more challenging when you have a bunch of mountains and the wind, and all the weather stuff you have to learn is actually a lot of work. I wasn't expecting learning to fly would be so much work, but after leaving the Air Force, I had to at least do the minimum to pretend to be a real airman. So I had to do that and get my license. So. I'm almost done. It's a lot. I can tell you I have much more respect for pilots now, even like general aviation pilots, let alone jets and commercial pilots. But this is a lot of work. So that's hours after hours of learning different things, and you become a weatherman. You become a little bit of everything, a mechanic. You have to learn pretty much every aspect of the job. It's a lot.
That's
It's
pretty
fun.
cool. I haven't started my foray into flying yet. But that does sound pretty awesome. I'm always very impressed. A few of my friends have taken up learning how to fly as a hobby, and I mean, it's a milestone in their life. It changes them. It changes the way that they think about things. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's also convenient. When particularly during COVID, you can go places and not have to, I guess, go in a plane with a bunch of sick people or whatever, right? So that's always pretty fun. All right, so we got all the questions from the group. Wanted first to thank you for joining. This was so much fun because I think people learn a ton. You even opened a whole career journey to all these people that are doing traditional IT cyber stuff. So I'm sure they're gonna look at making potentially much more money on the OT side as well. But I always give the last comments, meaningful comments. I'm gonna tell the group after you're done what the next show will be about, but love to give you the room for you to give your last words.
Sure. So number one, I see you're trying to land the plane on this conversation, you might say, Nick. But in all seriousness, point number one, follow 62443. So pick a controls framework and comply to that controls framework. That is the first place to start. Number two, get your products off the internet. Help us eliminate this direct exposure problem. So those are my two parting pieces of advice, or my ask, if you will.
Yeah, very good. And I can tell you, people are texting me already and saying that they learn a lot. Usually we have always kind of the same, kind of IT subject. So it's pretty awesome to get someone with your background. And hopefully we're gonna get people excited about the market and the fact that there's so much need and so much demand. And people really need to step up and help both the vendors, the contractors that do the installation, and also the government and of course the education of the public to for us to be more secure. Wanted to remind everybody that next Tuesday at 1 p.m. we're going to get the co-founder and CTO of Traceable AI, the API security company, just raised their Series B, is also working with the CEO of Harness as a co-founder, and Harness just raised at a 3.7 billion valuation. So they're doing pretty well. They also raised their funds, a pretty large fund of, I think, $500 million of funding with a pretty unique model. So it's going to be a fun discussion next week with Sanjay, the CTO of Traceable AI. But again, Megan, wanted to thank you for your time. It was a lot of fun. So many people are excited. I think you're going to get a lot of compliments on your LinkedIn, and people can follow you, of course, there. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe and healthy. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.